What's your black girl magic? Well, what if your black girl magic is just that I enjoyed every day? That's my magic. I didn't change anything about my community. I worked in the community, but nothing changed because I was there. I didn't create an organization. I didn't change a policy. I didn't do any of that. My legacy is I was content every day. That's my legacy.
Hey there, and welcome to Work is Third, the podcast that is all about indulging in rest, setting boundaries, finding joy, and putting yourself first. I'm Dawn Hunter, your host, and I'm so excited you're here. What if your legacy wasn't about how hard you worked, but how fully you lived? In this episode, I sit down with Dr. Nicole Taylor to explore the stories we inherited about work, productivity, and worth, and how to reclaim joy, self-expression, and freedom along the way. From fashion dreams to reflections on faith, community, and time, this one is a heartfelt and powerful ride. If you want to skip around, I've added section markers in addition to the regular chapter markers, but honestly, you're going to want to stick around for the whole thing. Let's dive in. Hello, Nicole, and welcome to Work is Third.
Good afternoon, Dawn Hunter. I can't think of a better way to spend my afternoon today.
I'm really excited that you're here. I say the word excited a lot, but I always enjoy being in conversation with you because you always have so many words of wisdom and just great insight into everything, work, life, all the things.
Lessons learned, passing on the info.
I'm hoping that you'll pass on some great info to our listeners today. But before we dive into the conversation, what is a word to describe how you're feeling today or how you're doing today?
I thought I knew the answer to this before we started, but now I want to give it some other thought. So I think my feeling today is reflective.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably tied to the weather. It's pretty cloudy here. It's been raining for a day, but it feels like 40 days and 40 nights, and the world is going to float away in the DMV area. But definitely a good natural moment to pause and give some things some thought.
I love rainy days. Actually, they're my favorite days. And whenever it's a rainy day, for me, that's an opportunity to shift and to rest and to do less. So those are my favorite kind of days. Also, I'm in Florida and it is hot most of the time. It is sunny nearly every day, except for like 1 month in the summer.
Such a hard life.
It's difficult.
Break my heart. Shucks. And I can't say that I don't know that. I lived in Key West for many years. So I'm familiar with the euphoria that comes across in Florida. So I'm not spiting you any of that, but we ain't got none of that in the DMV right now.
Although I have to say, I don't think I knew that you lived in Key West.
Back when the world was different and adventure came with fewer risks, I took a civil servant job and I was down in Key West. I followed a boy who was in the military and ended up working in their family service center, which was a capstone to a lot of other things that I've done in my career. But yes, I spent some time in Key West. I left because I realized if I stayed here any longer, I would no longer be a productive person.
Did you say you would no longer be a productive person?
Yes, Key West it's like a continuous cool breeze full of coconut and mango scents that leaves you in a space of nothingness. Like, why would I do anything other than what I'm doing right now? So there's just not an urge to be productive. There's not an urgency to do anything. It's such a timely thing to think about as I reflect in this conversation. You're not really spurred to do much other than exist. And at that age, I knew I needed to do more than just exist.
Okay, because I'm like, that sounds really ideal, actually. Why would you give that up?
Yeah, it did. It did. But after you spend 4 years in college, you don't spend that much time and money to rest on a beach. At least I didn't. I'm not knocking those who did, but that wasn't for me. I needed something different, something meaningful to really work in my purpose. Not that I did not do that at the Family Service Center there. That was really a fantastic opportunity. The timing just wasn't right for where my life was at that moment.
So what did it mean to you then to be productive at that point in your life?
It meant what my parents told me was productive. That was my guide rule, and you and I have chatted a bit about this before. All of the wonderful freedoms and inspirations and flexibilities that young adults and early career professionals have now, I did not have uh, in my early career years. The plan was clear. You do all these wonderful things in high school to get into a good college. You go to college, you get a degree so that you can pay your bills. And that was the productivity. That was the goal. And it really came from a genuine space, I think, from parents who were just in an economic status where they were getting by. And they were clear that I can't, I know I don't have enough to provide for you indefinitely, which is very different now because I understand that folks are staying at home till their 30s. I can't imagine staying with my mom that long, but I'm not knocking those who do. But that sense of productivity was really a return on my degree. I spent all this time learning around politics and I'm going to go sit on a beach. It just didn't line up for me. So, productivity and being productive at that point in my life, I needed to be away from an atmosphere that really inspired you to not be productive.
We are the same in that we have talked about this before, but I grew up with a very similar kind of perspective on work. And when I graduated from college, I didn't have something lined up right away. And I remember my parents were like, "When are you getting out of this house? Shouldn't you be getting a job somewhere?" And it's funny because I recently asked my mom, probably for the first time in my life, I said, "What did you think I was going to be when I grew up?" And she said, "I don't know. I just knew you were going to be successful." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I mean, that's really interesting because I think that played into my own career path, right? I didn't have direction. I didn't have somebody saying, "You should do this or you should do that." I used to want to be a neurosurgeon. I said that all the time when I was like 10 years old. I don't know where that came from, but nobody really pushed me and said, "Well, here's what you need to do if you want to be a
Mhm.
surgeon." So, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know that I think that's really if you look at the time capsule that we're talking about, the world wasn't open to us the way it is now. You know, the World Wide Web, which became the internet, I was cleaning out some stuff and had to chuckle at my AT&T disc of www time that we all used to get, where you can get 30 minutes to an hour. You got that floppy disk, or you got the CD that gave you time on the internet. Times have changed. But we didn't think about that then. Our world was our neighborhood, it was our city, it was our state, it was our school environment. That was our world. We did not have access to the full world that we have now. So our parents gave us what they had. You know, I'm not knocking my mother, but my mother was a officer in the Army Reserves, and it served for many years. So her perspective on life as a black girl going into black girlhood, going into black womanhood, it had very finite shape. There was no room for excuse. There was no room for underperformance. There was no room for anything other than the world is going to give you nothing. You will be the bottom rung. You will have to work 4 times as hard to prove yourself to be a quarter of the value. This is what you must do. Her guidance and her direction wasn't necessarily, oh, well, you know how you could navigate this? Because I just knew I was going to the Fashion Institute of Technology to design shoes.
I love that.
That's where I was going. That's what I loved. I was not that teenager that looked through magazines to stay up with celebrity reality life. I wanted to look at the fashion. I wanted to see what fashion was there. My high school was a school for gifted individuals. We didn't have a football team, but we had a modeling club that I started and supported and conducted. I saw pictures of that not too long ago. It made me chuckle. My first fashion show. I wanted to be in fashion. And then I had that very real moment when my mother told me fashion's not going to pay you for a long time. You need to eat. So you need to choose something that's going to be able to pay for the bills and provide you sustenance. So I majored in political science. I thought that's never going to go away. There will always be politics. Somebody will always be thinking through something. And I'm genuinely attracted to the concepts and the foundations and principles of poli sci. So it wasn't that it wasn't challenging because Hampton University put me through some rigor. It was definitely not an easy degree to achieve, but that's where I thought I was going. And then my mother was like, no, you got to get up out of here. I don't care where you go, but you cannot stay here. There was an expiration date on your bed. It happened on your graduation day from high school. The choices you make from here on out, good luck. I've done what I can do.
Okay. So I have so many follow-up questions for you. The first is, because a lot of people who I think will be listening to this are probably have been in a similar boat. People who went to college with a certain dream. So I would say people like us, people, women of color, people who are first generation students who went into, post high school education with a dream. And then their parents were like, you're not doing that.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Yeah. And there's a lot of pressure on us to do
A tremendous
something.
amount of pressure.
Mhm.
It's something that shapes you, and then I think you get to a point, and ironically, it's probably around the age group that we're in where you're like, "Well, did that work? And is that what I want to continue to do?" I often use the phrase with my friends and mentors, our tomorrows don't outnumber our yesterdays anymore. So we
Right.
start to think differently about where we want to deposit ourselves, what kind of time we want to give, who we want to be involved with, what we want to do. And it's not to be disrespectful to what our parents taught us, but the world is different now. There are different avenues now that didn't exist 25 years ago, that didn't exist 30 years ago. So now I often find myself wrestling with the thought, like, did I miss it? Did I miss the moment? Was there a moment when I was supposed to stand up to my parents and say, no, I'm going to backpack around Europe for 6 months. I've earned the money. I'm gonna go. I'm not gonna go directly into a career. Could that have happened? And as I reflect on who my mother and father were, no, that would never happen. That they would have thought that there was something wrong with me mentally. They would not have been able to comprehend that.
I also grew up in the military. My parents were both Air Force, and my father was a career Air Force. And I often I keep in touch with a lot of the people I went to school with at the last Air Force base that we were stationed at. We all went into middle school together. Many of us went to high school together, and a lot of us have kept in touch over the years. And I would say we have a little cohort of people who are super successful, who are doing really amazing things in the world. But to your point, I wonder how many of us would have said, if we had choice over our path, is this what we would have been doing?
Mhm.
So
A good
you
question.
wanted to you wanted to go to fashion school.
I wanted to design shoes. I still want to design shoes. I love shoes. I love the way that they can elevate a moment for it's gender irrespective. The right shoe just elevates someone's posture. It makes them more confident. It creates, for women, if it's a heel, it straightens you up. You can't hunch over in heels. And there's a technique to walking in stilettos. So there's an understanding of confidence that comes with it. I look at the last Met Gala, and I paid attention to nothing that anybody had on. I was looking at the shoes because the dandy era was about the wingtip, and that's a shoe you
Mm.
don't see a lot anymore. I find myself looking at the shoes on folks on the train when I commute, and I think, do you know about the wonder of shoes? Shoes are amazing. If I get theoretical and wax poetic about it for a moment, as we grow from newborns forward, getting our first pair of shoes is a moment. It is a big deal. So I don't know if that's when I started to think about them differently, but I'm always thinking about the shoe. When I travel, I look at people's feet and I know they're like, why is she staring at me? Because your shoe tells me a lot about you. Your shoe tells me, did you choose comfort? Did you choose style? Did you choose both? Did you make an intentional decision? Or is it just what was available and you were running late and you needed to get to your flight? My grandmother was very, very intentional about what she wore when she flew. There was a flight ensemble. I have kept that tradition. So when I fly, it's not an outfit, it's a thought. It's a thought that happens there. But yes, I love shoes. Love the way they make people look. If you want to see what shoes really do in someone's life, look at kids when they get a new pair of shoes. Doesn't have to be the new Nike, doesn't have to be the new Louboutin, doesn't have to be anything designer. But when you see children trying on shoes, the wonder that they have in their eyes, that's what I wanted to do. But my mama said that won't pay the bills.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way.
Mhm. I love shoes. I have my own shoe collection
I was going to
that I
ask you, how
have.
many shoes do you own? Pairs of shoes.
At the height of my shoe collection, I think I was up to 300 pairs.
Do you have a closet just for shoes?
I do.
I love it.
I do. When I left Texas, I thought if I don't get rid of some of them to move back to the position that I accepted in DC, I'm going to need another truck just for my shoes. So I gave away a third of my collection to someone who I rehomed them, is what I try to tell myself. Like people do with pets, I rehomed my shoes to another shoe lover who was just utterly ecstatic to get them. But I have over time, I think I've rebuilt it up. And I've expanded in some other places. Like I didn't do a lot of tennis shoe sneakers in my 20s and 30s, and now I've moved through boat shoes, through Sperry's, through tie-ups, through sandals. So definitely expanded my collection. When I leave this earth, it's part of my advanced directives or bequeathing. I want someone to auction off my shoe collection and send the money back to Hampton University for a scholarship.
Do you have that already written out and
Mhm.
in okay.
Anytime I travel, I send it to my two dearest friends, both Hampton alumni, and that's it. When I leave this, if I don't make it back, everything in my house, auction it off, and make sure that you start a scholarship at Hampton.
Well, I don't want to leave that thought, but I really am curious about your description of what shoes mean to us, especially when we're younger.
Mhm.
And you reminded me of, I was thinking back to middle school and we could not afford name brand shoes, and how much your worth and your belonging depended on not just what you wore, but like your shoes, right? And like how other students, other people your age perceived you. It was a big deal.
It was a major deal. When you think about the other side of the conversation, that a lot of schools went to uniforms with a defined standard shoe because that variety in shoe of their students was causing violence, that young folks were being mugged and robbed of their shoes. When you think about it, shoes just mean so much more than something decorative. I think more so for the African American community. And if I wax again poetic, during enslavement, we didn't have shoes. There
Mm-hmm.
was burlap, there were fabrics, there were things that we were given or we created or we went without, but we did not have shoes. So when I thought about, going and I may still do it, God may still lead me there before I leave this earth. I still have designs hither, thither, and yon of shoes. And then I see some and I'm like, oh, that was a bad decision. And my mother did tell me very early on, do not buy trend, buy classic. Because trends will come and go, classics will always stay in fashion. So many of my shoes reflect that.
I am curious though, because, we've talked a bit about shoes. And is there anything that you do today to feed that passion that you clearly still have?
I just got off the phone earlier in a meeting talking with a local church about their missionary work and what could be done. And I, for the first time in my life, I said it out loud, even though I hated it as a child because it's what my parents made me do. When I'm not active in the community, I'm not whole. I feel amiss. Something's wrong. I'm in a funk. Just like we get seasonal affective disorder when we don't have sunshine. When I don't have that community thing, I'm like, ooh, I'm not whole. I have a physical reaction to it. So the piece around shoes, I'm able to work with the junior league here in Howard County around a lot of their coat drives, around a lot of their investments in the early years of children, because that's where we form our understanding of life. Whether we like it or not, I like the line in the movie Hope Floats. Childhood is something we spend the rest of our lifetime trying to outgrow or outlive. And I hate that for kids. I didn't have an unhappy childhood. I knew my mom did the best she could do. But when I look at kids today, I'm like, these are your formative years. After 9, all of your opinions, all of your ideas are done. So shoes play a role in that. Having shoes to come to, having the appropriate footwear for your culture play a role in that. And sometimes I think we forget that on this big global tabletop that we all live in now, clothing means something different in other cultures than it does here in the US. It can identify your marital status, it can reflect your position in a community, it can identify your professional role. It's very different than what we have here.
It's very different. And you saying that out loud, I hadn't really thought of that. It's something that I know just kind of maybe subconsciously when, I look at fashion from other cultures, I know that it means something, but to say it out loud, it's like, oh yeah, it does. And here in the US, it's very different. And I think it's really intriguing too to think about how you connected it to the history of being enslaved and how that evolved and how has fashion evolved from those days for us as a culture and as a form of self-expression and maybe as a form of rebellion and resistance.
I agree to all of the above. Shoes have done that. 12 Years a Slave was a great book, a great story. But I think the most pivotal piece, and I reflect more on the movie because I think more people have seen the movie than I read the actual book. But there's that moment when Patsy says, for all the cotton that I pick for you, at least one day a week, I'm going to be clean. And she dresses full dress, full hoop skirt, full bustle, full dress for that time period to get a sliver of soap from a neighboring plantation. That's the value and the resistance and the resilience that many of the things that we just no one felt like we were deserving of, we were worthy of. Shoes, cleanliness, hygiene. As a black woman in that movie and then a black woman in the world today, our efforts and our productivity and our performance is understood. There's a moniker for it, Black Girl Magic. There's an expectation of it. But how we give our own selves care to be able to do that often comes under scrutiny and is policed. Shoes are also a place of freedom, a place of freedom. When I think about the number of folks who went through, I have family near Suffolk, Virginia, which is near the Great Swamp, which was part of the Underground Railroad and the mapping north. When I think about the number of people who walk through those areas with no shoes on to get to a place where someone gave them their first pair, that moment, it signified being free. So yeah, shoes mean a lot to me.
The thing that just popped into my head is also the word intentional. And in many of the conversations that I've had for this podcast so far, that word comes up quite a bit. But what we're talking about is being intentional in the way that you carry yourself and present yourself and what that can mean about who you are, what you value, how you move through the world. So what are some other ways besides or in addition to, not besides, shoes that you express yourself, that you express that freedom and joy that you feel, that you express your whole self?
There are, I think, some ways that are collective. The top of the pandemic shut all hair salons down. And that's another thing that's very important in our community because our hair was often left unkempt during enslavement. It wasn't something that anybody thought about, although we were often asked to style hair for others. Our own was always, also part of that worth picture that people had of us. So not being able to get to the salon, I did what every other person did who had to think about it differently is we all went, and the phrase is natural, but we stopped using chemical relaxers. We stopped using chemical treatments and I know a lot of people think that you do it to straighten your hair, but I have very tightly coiled hair. So for me, it was just to manage it, to be able to do something, anything with it, I needed that platform. But I am now, what, 8 years out, 8.5 years out of being natural. But I choose not to. I don't do twists. I don't do any of those other styles. I'm not knocking them. And I say all the time, just because I don't look like you in your natural hair state doesn't mean that mine's not natural. Or that I didn't have time to do it, or that I didn't put in the effort. No, this is what's comfortable for me. So know that there's also this kind of conversation that goes along with it. So yes, hair has always been a point of contention and conversation in our community for Black women. India Ari set us all back and said, "I am not our hair," and we were like, "What? What do you mean? What do you mean you're not your hair?" That was part of the tradition for getting ready for major holidays and church functions. Saturday, that was all Saturday was hair day.
Yeah.
And then you had to hold it indefinitely because your parents couldn't get it done frequently. So that one style, whatever it was, had to get you through Easter, through the following 2 weeks of school before there was time and or resources to do it again. So, my hair expression is also something but I choose not to wear a full face of makeup. I love that, women of color are really embracing that. I love that that is something where, hands down, many of our multi-billionaire moguls look like us, and they have reinvented this industry for us. I just choose to dabble in it. My mother sent me to modeling school. And I've done a bit of that too in this eclectic thing I call life. So I can put on a full face. I know all the techniques, but I don't have that and have not had that need to paint myself as something other than what I know myself to be. I know that other women use makeup, and that is exactly who they are. But for me, it's a false impression. When I need to do it, I will. When it's called for, I do. You know, you splash a little here, you make sure that it's even tone, your skin looks good for today's production. So yes, you do these things. But other than that, I am comfortable in this state. I like to feel the world on my face. And oftentimes when you put on a lot of makeup, I'm like, oh Lord, I cannot breathe. I literally cannot breathe. That's what happens when you study public health. You learn all these other clinical things, and the skin is an organ. And I'm like, oh, I'm killing it. I have to let it breathe. So I love to see women who have really mastered lighting and shading and things to make their face do different things. I think that's amazing. That's just not for me. I express myself differently. The other piece of expression that I use other than shoes and that is I am a faith-based person. I was born and raised in the Church of God in Christ, so I express myself probably my most strong when I attend church services. Whatever that church service may be. My friends, we all grew up in similar faiths, and we joke about when was the first time you wore a dress or a skirt suit to church and you did not have on a slip.
You got to have
That
a
was a
slip.
moment. That was a moment of resistance and freedom. And now I can't help it. Yes, I do silently judge folks at church. Forgive me. I'm working on me. I understand now why that was necessary. But at the time, I was like, ugh, it's the eighth layer. Why? Why do we have to put that on? I get hot. It's just, but now I understand as our bodies change and things aren't as grandma would say, they don't stay as stable as they used to, baby. Sometimes they move around without your permission. A slip is helpful. I get it now. I get it now. Lined suits are, you can go out and buy a wonderful dress, suit. They don't come lined anymore. So it's just that fabric on the exterior in you, and that's more insight than many people should give. But yes, there are those kind of moments and things that church service is something that I prepare for on a Saturday that I okay, I lay this out. I know I'm gonna put this on. It's not just a time saver, but it's my reverence for that activity of going into worship.
I love that this conversation is really about how we express ourselves. And you reminded me of what I think is a funny story of my own experience with makeup, which is I've always been very natural. I'm very sporty. I spend a lot of time, especially even in my 20s and 30s, just playing sports and being outside and hiking and all these things. So I was never big on makeup. And I went to a meeting. It was when I lived in New Mexico, which is my home state, but I was living and working there. And there was a meeting on the border. And I remember the Spanish language newspaper had taken a picture of me, with a mic and talking. And I was so excited. I was like, oh, they captured this. And then I was like, I look so plain. I was like, brown hair, brown skin, brown eyes, zero, like very simple makeup. Like you couldn't even tell I was wearing any makeup. And I was like, I don't want to look like that in a newspaper photograph again. So I started experimenting a little bit more. And, I'm playing around with having a bold lip color now. And often if you see me around town, I've got sparkly purple eyeshadow on. And part of that is in my book club, we read this book, Joyful. And it was just for me, what is something that I can do to express my own joy and the way that I move through this world? And I was like, I look very plain, but I'm a very joyful person. And there's nothing that you can see on my face right now that would show that. And so I really tried to be more intentional. And I used to wear earrings like this when I was younger. And then I had this like long stretch of time where I was just wearing these little, little bitty
The
earrings. And
corporate,
in
the
fact,
corporate, the
yes,
corporate jewelry.
when I was in law school, I remember doing mock oral arguments, and they made a comment about the earrings I was wearing. Those kinds of pressures, they sit on you and they change your behavior. And so now I'm at the point where I'm like, no, I'm expressing myself. I'm wearing my big earrings. I'm dyeing my hair. I'm wearing a bold color. I'm doing these things that just say like, I am a joyful person. And if you see me walking down the street, I hope you think like, she looks colorful and has a colorful personality.
That is so interesting. I express myself in bright colors of clothing. I am that person that will wear chartreuse. I will. I went to an organization that I was employed with maybe 2 years ago, maybe three now. I went to our annual conference, and on the opening night, I wore yellow. The oohs and ahs. I wore yellow. I think the following day I wore baby blue. The day after that I wore like this beautiful lime green. So yes, I resonate with that. I do choose to express the flexibility that a melanated complexion gives me. I can wear colors that other people might shy away from, but I'm attracted to those bold colors. In addition to a shoe collection, I think every summer, well, I know I do. Every spring or summer I pick a color and that's going to be my key color for that year. And this year yeah, it's you don't
Wait,
do it
what?
conscientiously, but a lot of people gravitate toward that. That key color that you're going to wear all summer long. Your basics are in that. And this year I'm really gravitating toward green. Lots of green and metallic kind of accents, gold, bronze, pewters. I'm in my green phase. Now I'll wear other things, but the key color that you'll probably see me most of the time is going to be either a green or an orange.
Now I'm going to be a lot more attentive.
There's so many things that we take for granted in a day's living that I think it's okay to say, all right, this season I'm in a green season. I've just been gravitating toward sage and olive and grass green, moss green, seafoam green, just gravitating to mint green has really been calling me. I mean, I think it's okay to say that's where my mood is. I do believe that we have a connectivity to this earth in some way, shape, or form, whether we want to own it or not, that subconsciously guides us day to day.
I guess it just, again, makes me think about how to be more intentional in that choice and think thematically, what am I trying to express this summer? And actually, that makes me think about how we respond to the change of seasons in general.
Mhm.
And just when we're wintering, what does that look like? What are we wearing? How are we presenting ourselves? And in the summer, how are we expressing and aligning our energy with the energy of summer or spring, right? Whatever the season is. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I could be a little bit more intentional in doing that.
But I think that's a testimony to how we and where you and I really have had some great conversations of how we just go through life day by day on this routine. The seasons come, the seasons go. Oh, the year goes by so fast. Well, it goes by fast because in January we're planning meetings in April. In April we're planning meetings in August. In August we're planning for meetings in December or January of the next year. So we're guided by schedules. Calendaring takes us through an entire year, and then we look back on it and go, I said this was going to be the summer. I was going to enjoy it. And it flew past me. Well, it flew past you because we didn't think about it being summer as adults, as parents, as people taking care of aging parents, as people, as caregivers. We don't think that the summer is ours anymore. We make wonderful choices for our children, but we don't think about the summer months for ourselves.
Mm, yes.
What are the summer things that we're going to do? Are we taking short vacations? Are we taking time to really invest in us? Because our daily life when we work is invested in that job, whether you want to own it or not. That's the facts. Whatever industry you find yourself in, whatever discipline you find yourself in, and there, I am not knocking that because I work the hustle myself. But I have the pandemic just really affected me when we got that number of folks who were no longer here, who left the earth either directly related to COVID or because nobody could really pinpoint that, or COVID related illnesses. People who got up and thought, next year I'm going to do this, or next month I'm going to do this, or by the end of the year, these are my goals. And they're no longer here. Time is the one thing that we can't get back. Once you spend it, it's just spent. So I'm committing myself to, yes, I can still do that daily hustle, but I have to be specific about, okay, how am I hustling for me? I went years, and in this area, if you've ever lived in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, you'll understand what I'm talking about. You get a bit of it in Miami, you see a lot of it in Houston, but we live in an area that's so urbanized. Our entire life is dictated by where we live. So the commute to and from work are hours that we give up in a day willingly. So thank you, Lord, for a paycheck. And then by the time Saturday comes around, we're running all the errands we didn't have time or energy to do during the week. So I think differently about that now. I am a big fan of, okay, I'm gonna take a mental health day. And that doesn't mean that I'm about to snap. That could mean that I'm so far behind in my laundry, I'm gonna scream. I need time to actually do the things of adult and daily living outside of the scope of the work that I do. And I say, hey, I need it. I encourage anyone I work with, staff, you don't have to give me details. I'm not that person. Do you have PTO? Is that allowed? Let me check and see what we need. I expect you to be the professional that I demonstrate. But I also understand that this thing called life in 2025 is very complex and very complicated. There's just such a different nuance to living in the world today that I am purposeful about noticing the colors of flowers when they bloom, looking at the birds. I speak to the birds. Good morning, Mr. Blackbird. Good morning, Mr. Crow. Please don't crap on my car while I'm parked here. I talk to the world around me so that when I'm not in the world around me, when I'm remote or when I'm in the office or when I'm in a setting where the world I can only see through glass, I have a balance to that.
I do something very similar, and I think it's an important strategy to share with people about how to be more aware, how to bring awareness into your daily life and pause and appreciate the world around you and appreciate every moment that you have on this earth. You know, I try not to take my phone with me on walks, or if I have it, I don't pull it out. I'm walking, I'm noticing the butterflies and hearing the sounds and looking at the trees and watching my dog just be joyful and sniffing all these amazing smells that
Blades
he's
of
walking
grass.
past. And yeah, and I think for me too, COVID was really eye opening, and as it was for so many of us. But to see the devastation and the loss, and for people who thought they had another moment and didn't, you know, then how are we using our own moments every day? And in fact, like since December, I've been wintering and really just trying to rest and heal and look back and say, I haven't really taken a break like this since probably before I went to law school.
Right,
And yeah,
right.
and that's a long time to not give yourself a break, to not take care of what other needs that you have and to be putting work or school or whatever it was first. And it's been a real big shift for me to say, I'm going to put myself first, my well being, my happiness, my joy. And on some days, that means maybe I don't work because I really need to get my laundry done, like you're saying. It was, in fact, on my way here today. And I was like, I really need to do my laundry.
Yes. Do you fight with the shame and the guilt that says you're being lazy, you're procrastinating, you're and all of the other new terms that we have? I reflected on that today too. You know, being still is a science. The world that we live in, especially in this country, is not designed for us to be still. Motion and productivity and performance and results are the country that we live in. It is what it is. We haven't left yet, so apparently we understand it and we've worked the animal the way the animal works for us. But that moment when I moved into this house in August, and if you stop by today, you would think I moved in yesterday.
Mm,
There are some boxes I've unpacked, some that I didn't. Some that I said, oh, I'll get around to it. I'll get around to it. And then I looked at them and thought, well, I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. So why unpack it now? I may have to pack it back up and move it. So it'll just sit where it is. And making peace with that, you know, coming to terms with the inner part of me that says order requires that I put something away. Order requires that this thing go back here. And that may be the military thing in my mind, but I'm okay with yeah, I'm gonna get to that tomorrow.
mm-hmm.
I'll get to it on Friday. And if not, that's okay too.
Yep.
That's okay too. Trying to confront the voice in my head that says, how are you going to go out in the world and serve other people and your house is in disarray? So I'm going to put my
Mm-hmm.
shoes on and grab my keys and go get in the car, go serve other people. And I'm going to be all right with that. That's fine. I don't have to have my world at a certain point to be able to serve someone else in their world. And maybe serving them in their world is the thing that I need to do so that when I come back to my world, I have a different appreciation for what I have in my world. I read a post recently, and I have really grappled with this in my career, the concept of constructive criticism and feedback. And in a lot of spaces, people think it's the same thing, and it is not. It is
Mm-mm.
not. Inherently, criticism says you did something wrong, that you should have done a different way to do better. Feedback says, hey, I saw how you did this. Did you think about doing this? Or did you consider this? It validates what you did and gives you some other thoughts around it. So, constructive criticism or criticism and leadership without accountability to me sits in that space. It's that leader saying, why didn't you get this done? I needed this done by XYZ. You did do it, but this isn't up to the standard that I needed it to be. All right, say more. As opposed to feedback that says, hey, I really appreciate you giving me this draft to review. I can see now that maybe my instructions weren't clear.
Right. Well, and then you're taking ownership of your own
Being
behavior.
accountable as the leader that
Yeah.
says something in my leadership didn't bridge a gap,
Mhm.
as opposed to criticizing someone and saying, why didn't you read my mind?
Right.
Why are you not telepathic?
Why didn't you do what I asked?
I did do what you asked. No, you didn't. So getting to a space and a place that really helps me to function differently and to perform at a higher level, to work at the top of my strengths. The activity of doing the work without thinking about how the work is done is a space that I think leaders could spend more time in, because that gets you to, well, maybe I met this person on a day where they just weren't having their best day. In my what I thought I was giving them as to get them inspired, get them moving, I didn't realize that it was their mother's heavenly birthday. I didn't realize that that was the day that they got in a car accident on the way to work, and that's why they were late. And I didn't think about that person in front of me. I had a conversation with a dear friend, and I consider her a colleague as well, with the folks who are coming out of public school programs right now, who graduated last weekend and have absolutely no horizon for employment, but yet had scholastic and academic requirements to complete preceptorships in departments that don't just went away. They don't
Mhm.
exist anymore. That person that they were working with doesn't have that role anymore, or the work that they were doing was literally erased, and then demanding that they finish it on time.
I can't even imagine what people are going through, right? So many of the people that we know, even in our networks, are experiencing that right now and having to figure out how to, maybe feeling like they need to pivot, that they have to figure out their next step, while also being in a moment where maybe they can pause and reevaluate what it is that they're doing. But we're in a world that says you don't have time to do that. You need to figure it out
Now, right
now.
now, right now. And
Yeah.
it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You need a job to pay the bills.
Yep.
That we find ourselves working to pay the bills. My counterparts had different thoughts when they went to college. They went to college to get a career. I went to college because I had to pay my own bills.
Hmm.
I worked my way through every degree I have. There's not been a time when I just went to school. Undergrad, I had work study, and then I had a regular job that I stepped into immediately after undergrad. I worked full time getting my master's. I worked full time getting my doctorate. There's never been a moment to where I could say, "Hey, I'm gonna stay at home and I'm gonna go get this academic experience for 3 years and come out with this degree." I have always worked,
Me too.
and right now, I had the opportunity, unexpected opportunity, to be able to stop for a moment and say, "Wait a minute, what are they gonna say about you when you leave this earth?
Hmm.
What is the thing that folks are gonna be like? Yeah, that's Nicole. Are they gonna say she was hardworking? I don't know if I want to skip into heaven that way." Used to see the folks who were retiring with perfect attendance. Why? Why? Why?
Why? Yeah.
Why? Or people who prepare to retire and have like 300 hours of vacation time that they're going to take first. So they're going to be gone for 6 months and then they retire. Again, not knocking the hustle. I get it. But I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't think that that's my destiny. I don't think that when I leave this earth, that'll be my legacy, that people will say she was hardworking. She never missed a day. She was always committed to the organization's mission. I would rather them say she did her very best, personally and professionally, to leave this world differently than the one she found.
I love that. And I feel that deep in my soul as well. Because that's also what drives me is I tell people this story one time. There was this game, it probably still exists. It's called Imagine If.
Mhm.
And it was like the questions were imagine if the person playing the game was a whatever. So for me, the question that came up was imagine if Dawn was a sea creature. And then everyone gets to guess out of the options. And then if you choose the same option as the person the question is about, you get a point. So the question was, what if Dawn was a sea creature? And I picked seahorse.
That is exactly what I was going to say. I was like, Dawn would be a seahorse. It would be a seahorse.
Well, let me tell you, no one in my life thought that I was a seahorse at the time. This was probably in like my early 20s. Literally everyone in the group picked crab. And I was like,
Yeah, I couldn't see that.
eye-opening moment for me, right? It's a game. And I was just like, wow, no, everybody thinks that I would be the crab. And this was at a time in my life where I was going through a really deep depression, and I probably was very difficult and crabby. But it was also one of those moments that I still remember because it did make me think about what is the legacy that I want to leave? How do I want people to remember me? I don't want to be this person who is constantly achieving and has awards and has perfect attendance or did any of these things. I want to be someone who, had good relationships with people and was a great auntie and, left beautiful poetry that probably no one will ever read, but just did these creative things and expressed myself and lived life very fully. And that is what has really been driving me. And that's part of what drives my interest in doing this podcast, really, and having these conversations to share these stories about, not putting work first and recognizing that life is short and we're not promised a tomorrow, as you said, to get to do any of these things that we want to do.
Not at all. I had a colleague, it was during the pandemic, uh, a vibrant colleague that had been with the organization. I think she'd been there like 18 years. I'd been there maybe 2. And we just got an announcement through the HR system that they had passed away. Wow, that is crazy. I just talked to her yesterday, one of those scenarios. So I was talking to my next level leader, and she mentioned, she was like, Nicole, they say that she collapsed over her keyboard during the workday.
Mm.
That has stayed with me. That's been a good 6 years. That has stayed with me because I live alone. I have a dear friend that passed away. Nobody knew it. They don't know how long he was gone in the house before someone went to check on him. But the key to that, and this is something that I've recently understood, is if you don't want to be concerned about as a single-minded person living in a home alone, then you're gonna have to go outside and let people know you live alone. You can't overcome that. I have friends that say, I know if I don't hear from you in a month, call the police and do a welfare check. And I am okay with that. Break in the door if you have to. I try to keep a little money in the savings to make sure that we can repair that. But if you don't want that outcome, you're going to have to be seen. And that's scary for a lot of us, but I don't want to be seen. I'm comfortable. Netflix and chill created an excuse for us to not move outside our door. And then as our bodies age, well, sometimes they want to go outside, sometimes they don't. Sometimes going outside is a bigger effort than it is staying in the house. But if that's what I want, then you got to be active in your community, active in a church, active somewhere where there's some sort of routine thing that people get used to seeing you at. So when they don't see you there, it raises questions.
Yeah, where they're concerned about your welfare. You talked about
Exactly.
community earlier, so I'm glad it came back to this because really I think especially in today's online environment, the world of social media pushes us to be isolated. And it's very easy, as you say, to Netflix and chill. It's very easy to go through your life without being very active these days, where it was very different than when we were growing up. And I think part of how we weather life in general, but especially under the current moment in the US where there are a lot of challenges, right, for us who work in the social justice space, who work in policy space, trying to navigate what's going on, is that we are going to navigate that best by being in community with each other, by knowing our neighbors, by having deep relationships, by caring about each other. And you can't do that if you're just sitting at home. And you can't do that if you're at over your desk, if you're hunched over your keyboard. You got to get out and you got to do these other things, not just to be joyful, but also to be in relationship with other people and with the world.
Agree, 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 agree. And you never know who's watching. You never know who's watching. And that's something, Dawn, that I think you give an example of. Because I know many of us, when you left your past role where we knew you from, we were like, "Ooh, what's she going to do next?" And I think we were all like waiting for the, hey, I'm back at such and such. And you've really extended it to a point where you're enjoying this moment. However long it is, however short it is, where it takes you, where it doesn't take you, things you want to try, you are living in enjoyment.
You're right. When I left my job at the end of 2023, so many people were like, can't wait to hear what you're doing next. Where are you going to be? What are you doing? And I
We're
was like,
programmed.
I'm going to be not waking up to an alarm.
Just turn them all off.
Yeah.
Get you
No
some
alarms.
darkening curtains, and you roll over when you roll over.
Got myself a new eye mask that has like the
Yes.
pillows. Yes.
Yes. When you wake
Mhm.
up is when you wake up.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm not doing anything. And I don't know when I'm going to be doing something. And maybe I'm not even going to do the thing that I was doing before. But I'm letting myself explore that. And you're right. I have been enjoying it and just going with the flow. And it's something I've been working a lot on too. And it's supported by being in therapy because, I've worked on how do I move from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, and knowing that right now in this moment, I can enjoy these days where I don't have a lot of obligations, or where I get to set the schedule that works for me, where I have a lot of freedom, where I can do all these creative things, because that is not going to be every day for the rest of my life. And I can worry about tomorrow. Today, to fully enjoy life, I have to be present in this moment. And in this moment, this is what I'm doing.
I so appreciate that. And I think the example that you're giving is causing all of us in your circles to be able to do a bit of, "Huh." So when the opportunity presented itself for me, I was like, "Ooh, thank you, Lord. I need a moment. I need a moment." We're so focused on life being this thing that we do and not live,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't have examples of living it around us. And as a Black woman, living life is characteristic with, what did you change about society? What's your Black girl magic? Well, what if your Black girl magic is just that I enjoyed every day? That's my magic. I didn't change anything about my community. I worked in the community, but nothing changed because I was there. I didn't create an organization. I didn't change a policy. I didn't do any of that. My legacy is I was content every day. That's my legacy. Isn't
I
that
love that.
awesome?
Yes.
Isn't that awesome? That is
I
that
love
let
that.
that be the Black girl magic. And I know a lot of folks are gonna be like, well, that's not Black girl magic, but it is. It really
It
is.
is. You define your magic.
Yes. What's your sparkle gonna be? And if you decide that at the midpoint of your life, based on how your family members have lived, that you want to change careers and start designing shoes, I say you take that course at FIT and see what happens.
And yeah, see where it takes you.
See where it takes you.
All right. So I bet that we could probably also have a 4-hour lunch and hang out, and it would be like no time passed at
Oh
all.
my gosh.
But I do want to start to wrap us up. And we covered a lot of ground. We've had so many great insights. And honestly, I love talking to you.
Same.
And
Same
I'm
thing.
really grateful for this. So if there was one thing to just wrap up, like a takeaway from our conversation together, what would that be for you?
Time is not promised. Consider how you spend every minute. Now. Don't wait on it.
On it. I'm going to take that because I also try to live by that. Thank you again so much for your time and your energy and your friendship. So glad that you were with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Always a delight to talk with you and to think theoretically around how we live life and what we can do to apply things differently.
Absolutely. All right. See you at the next thing, I'm sure.
See you at the next thing.
Nicole reminded us that time is not promised. And maybe, just maybe, your magic is simply that you enjoyed every day. If this conversation stirred something in you, please share it with someone you love And also think about how you can take one step closer to living life on your own terms. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps more folks to find the show. You can also sign up for the Better Boundaries Brief at thedawnlab.com for more reflections, resources, and ways to connect. Thanks for being here. Until next time, put yourself first.